Crafter, my name's Amanda and you are watching Crafters Autonomous. So earlier in the year I posted a crochet hacks video, and in the last week or two it has just taken off, gotten a crazy amount of views on it, so I'm super excited about that. I'm so glad that so many people are finding this video and enjoying it. I got some comments about how the hacks were life-changing. We were able to save a few skeins of Lion Brand's homespun yarn from the trash can. Although I did get one comment that the video was too long, but you know, a bunch of you guys watched it anyway, so I really appreciate that. So since y'all seem to be enjoying that first video so much, I wanted to bring you 5 more crochet hacks that actually work and that I use all the time. Hack number 1 is for when I'm working on a project, but I want to put it away for a little bit. I'm taking a break, but I don't want it to unravel. Now, I've seen a lot of solutions for this, things like grab a safety pin and put it through there, or put a stitch marker in there, but I'm going to show you something even easier that requires no extra materials. Basically, what I'm going to do is wherever I'm stopping my project, is I'm going to pull up a really big loop, and then I'm going to run the whole skein of yarn through the loop, and then just gently tighten it down. So basically it's like fastening off a crochet project, just I'm not going to cut the yarn. So I can take a break from this project, I'll just wind the rest of this yarn up. I can throw this in a bag, throw it in a suitcase, it can get all tangled up, jostled around, but when I'm ready to go work on it, my project won't have unraveled, and to start working again, all I have to do is just pull on this loop right here to loosen it up. Make my loop big enough that my yarn can fit through. Feed my yarn back through to undo it. And now I'm able to get back to work on my project. Hack number 2 is for threading yarn onto a needle when it is time to weave in the ends. Now personally, I'm a fan of the metal tapestry hooks because I find they're easier to force through my fabric, and I've broken a number of the plastic ones, but this hack works with both the metal tapestry needles and plastic tapestry needles. So if we were to try to thread our needle by pushing the end of the yarn through, we might get some of them through, but then it kind of splits and grabs and frays, and it's just a big mess. So a much easier way to thread yarn onto our needle is to have the needle so that way it's kind of up and down. So we would run through left to right with our eye of the needle, take our yarn piece over it, and we're gonna pinch it. So I've got it folded like this, and I'm pinching it between my fingers. Then slide the hook out while keeping that piece pinched, and then thread that pinched piece right on up through the needle. And just like that, we've quickly and easily got our yarn threaded onto our needle. This hack is especially helpful for yarns that tend to split a lot, so like Caron Simply Soft. If I were to try to force the tip of my yarn through the needle, I'm gonna have some problems. But instead, I can fold my yarn over the needle, pinch the yarn, pull out the needle, and then slide the pinch spot up through the eye of the needle, and now my needle's threaded. This hack works for other tricky yarns too, like Lion Brand's homespun. I know that people tend to love or hate this yarn. I personally love it, but I understand why some people get frustrated with it. But this hack even works with homespun. So if I have to force this end through the eye of the needle, that's never gonna happen. So instead, take the yarn, fold it over the eye of the needle, pinch it tightly between my fingers, pull the needle out, and then force the pinch spot up through the needle, and then pull it on up through like this tail out, and now I have the yarn threaded onto my needle. This hack can also even work for really thick yarns like this very chunky baby yarn. It does get harder as the yarn gets thicker though, just as a fair warning. So if your yarn is a bit on the thicker end, something that can be helpful is to try to spread your yarn out a little wider. So that way when we fold it over and pinch it, we make our folded spot as narrow this way as possible versus having it tightly twisted and then pinching it. See how much thicker that is? So with this yarn, I can kind of spread it left and right a little bit, make it a little wider, fold it over and pinch it. Take out the needle and then carefully force it on up through the needle. I've got my little nub coming out. pull it on through. And with a thick yarn like this, it's going to take a lot more work. And honestly, I would weave this end in most likely with just another crochet hook. But if you do want to weave it in with a tapestry needle, you can even get thick yarns through with this method. Unfortunately, this does not work for 100% of yarns. I've been able to use this hack for most yarns, including very thick yarns, but I've never been able to get it to work for Bernat blankets. So when I weave in the Bernat blanket yarn, I just use a hook. This hack unfortunately doesn't work for this yarn. Hack number 3 is an easy way to keep track of where you are at in your crochet pattern. And really what I want to show is kind of the modern version of this, but I'll first show you the old school method and then I'll show you the technology equivalent. So with the old school method, you'll have a physical pattern, maybe you print one out from offline that you're working on, and you want to keep track of where it's at, but you don't want to ruin your pattern. What you do is you take your pattern, put it into a plastic sleeve protector, and then as you're crocheting, you can highlight the steps you've already done. So let's say I was finishing up with round 24, I can just highlight that to let myself know that I've gone through that. I could also say, oh, there's a repeating pattern here. Let me make a note of that so I can keep track of that repeating pattern. And then once I'm done with round 25, highlight it all the way. And actually when I was working on this exact pattern, I really should have done that because I kept getting confused on which round I was actually on. So that's the old school method. And then when you're done, you can just wipe the dry erase pen off the sleeve and your pattern is still as good as new. But the technology equivalent of that, which I personally like because it's a little more portable, is to either take a picture of your pattern, or if you're using a pattern online, take a screenshot of the pattern. Either way, the goal is to end up with a photo of the pattern. Now I'm going to show this part on the iPhone, but I imagine if you have an Android or some other type of phone that you can take pictures and edit them on, that you could do a similar process. But for me, what I'm going to do is to keep track of where I'm at, is I'm going to go to my photo, tap edit in the top right, tap the 3 little dots, select markup, and then along the bottom, I'll pick a highlighter. I usually use green because it's easy to see and that means that I've already done it. And then I can just highlight any sections that I've already completed the steps for. Once I've done marking them off, I can just hit done and save the photo. Or I could also duplicate the photo if I want to have a picture of the pattern still unmarked, but also have a version where I'm keeping track of where I last made progress. But to sum up the modern version of this hack, take a picture of the pattern, go to the photo, and just edit the photo by highlighting the rows you've done, much like I showed with the sleeve protector. Hack number 4 is a trick to get your stitches even tighter when doing amigurumi. And the hack is that when we work single crochet stitches, we yarn under instead of yarn over. And this creates what is called the crossed single crochet stitch. I've got a video that breaks this down some more. I'll link to it up there and it includes some more examples, but I'll show you this hack here as well. So the steps are very similar to a normal single crochet, just we need to yarn under instead of yarn over. So as with normal single crochet, I'm going to start by inserting into the stitch where I want to work. And normally at this point, I would catch the yarn so that way the yarn goes over my hook from right to left. But with yarn under, I'm going to go around this way. So the yarn comes from right to left, but it goes under the hook and then back over. Now when I do yarn overs and yarn unders, I tend to, instead of catching with the hook, I tend to kind of pull the yarn end itself. So this would be the traditional yarn over where I go over the top from right to left. But the yarn under that we do for this stitch, I go underneath the hook from right to left and then back over the hook from left to right. So whether you use your hook to catch the yarn differently or you move the tail end with your left hand, either way, the same result. We yarn under where when it crosses over the top of the hook, it goes from left to right. So then to finish my stitch, I will pull up that loop. And then at this point I can yarn over or yarn under. The way the stitch works is by yarning under when we pull up that first loop, but personally I like to still yarn under even for the second yarn over, because if I go back and forth between them, I forget to do the yarn under and I end up yarning over and I fall back into my old habits. So I personally like to do the yarn under for both, but for the second pull up a loop, you can do a traditional yarn over. So again, to work this, insert into our stitch. Instead of yarning over, yarn under and pull that loop up. And then catch our yarn and pull up another loop. And I like to do this part with another yarn under. And that's how you do the cross single crochet. Now where this really comes in handy is when we're doing those decreases. So I'll do a decrease here. I insert in my next hook, yarn under, pull up a loop. That's my first stitch, go to my next stitch, insert, yarn under, pull up a loop, And then to finish it all up, I will yarn under one more time and pull through all 3 loops to work those 2 stitches together, and look at how nice and tight and snug that pulls it. I can go on to my next stitch, which I'll just work 1 single crochet but doing the yarn under method. Pull it up and finish it off. And look how nice and tight and snug that single crochet decreases using the yarn under method. So this is a great option for amigurumi to make all your stitches even tighter and prevent holes and gaping. As a quick note, it does tend to scale things and shrink things down just a little bit, but personally I don't find that it changes the size enough to actually be an issue, and the amount it shrinks the size is pretty insignificant. Hack number 5 is to figure out how many yards of yarn you have left based on the weight of the yarn. And y'all, I only very recently discovered this, and I honestly feel kind of stupid that I didn't figure this out sooner. Once you see it, it makes so much sense and it's very easy to use. So oftentimes crochet patterns will tell you how many yards of yarn you need. So for this particular pattern, they say that we need 377 yards of yarn. So let's say you have a crochet pattern, it tells you how many yards of yarn you need to use it. That's great and all if you're going out to buy yarn specifically for that project. But let's say I had read that I need 477 yards of yarn, and I have a different yarn, or I have a partially used skein of yarn, or just some random yarn ball, and I'm wondering, do I have enough yards of yarn to crochet this project? Now, I suppose one option would certainly be that I could unravel this entire ball of yarn, get out the yardstick, and start measuring, but that would take a lot of time, make a big mess, and probably wouldn't be super accurate. But something I could very easily do with this ball of yarn is I can weigh it. And the idea here is we're going to take the weight and then use the information from the yarn label to create a conversion and figure out how many yards we have. That sounds confusing, there's a little bit of math involved, but once you see it, it's very simple. So I just use a basic kitchen scale when doing this. The most important thing is that you work on a solid surface, because if you're working on a surface that can move, these scales can be a little sensitive to that. But basically what I'm going to do is I've got my scale booted up here, I'm going to tare it, and then I will place my yarn on the scale. So I have 1.1 ounces of this yarn. So on my little whiteboard here, I'm gonna write down that I have 1.1 ounces. Now I want to figure out how many yards is that. What I need to do is look on the package of yarn, and it's gonna tell me how many ounces that yarn was and how many yards it was. And those two values are gonna be equivalent values, meaning 4 ounces of this yarn is the same as 377 yards of this yarn. So what I'm going to do is I've got ounces right now, so I'm gonna find ounces on the yarn label, which is 4, and we're gonna divide the weight of our yarn by the amount on the yarn label. So then last of all, to finish going from ounces to yards, I'm gonna look again on my yarn label, find the number of yards. In this case, it says 378 yards, and so I'm gonna multiply then by 377 yards. So I'll punch this on the calculator, go 1.1 divided by 4 times 377 equals approximately 103.675 yards. I'm going to round that to 104 yards. So that's an example using specific numbers. If you want to plug your own numbers in, what goes into our first spot is the weight of yarn I have. Another way of thinking about this is the weight I get when I measure my yarn. Then we're going to divide that by the weight on the yarn label. And finally, we're gonna multiply it by the yards on the yarn label. And then that's going to give us the number of yards I have. So you're just gonna plug your numbers into these 3 boxes and you'll get a number. The only thing you have to be careful of is make sure that your units for the weight that you measure is the same as the units on the yarn label. So typically that'll be ounces or grams on the yarn label. And so on your scale, you might need to change it to grams or back into ounces. So now I know that I have about 104 yards of this weight 3 yarn. So if I find a pattern online and it says I need 58 yards of weight 3 yarn, I know, hey, I have enough of this, I can make this project. But if I come across a pattern that says I need 150 yards of weight 3 yarn, I'm gonna know, oh, I don't have enough of this yarn, I need to use different yarn or else go buy some more. So there you have it. Those are the 5 hacks that actually work and that I use all the time. Be sure to let me know in the comments which of these hacks you like the best. I love hearing people's feedback, and it's so interesting seeing how some people have been crocheting for years and are just now discovering things, and other people are just starting out, but one of these hacks or techniques is helping them make better progress. So I'm glad to have helped so many people out, and I hope that you guys enjoy these hacks as well. Now, I am going to have one more hack video coming out hopefully soon, but it's going to be a little bit different, a little bit controversial even perhaps. So make sure you sub to my channel so you'll know when that video gets posted, and I would really appreciate it if you leave a thumbs up on this video to let me know that you enjoyed it. But that's the video for today. Thank you so much for watching, and happy crafting!